Hello, this is Dr. Francois. I have to apologize to all my viewers over the past few years. I've been completely quiet, and as you can see, been very busy on my farm. Everything's beautiful, growing everywhere, and there's life and vibrancy everywhere. The reason why I've been quiet all this time is I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of studying, reading, etc., about the sort of things that are unfolding right at the moment. And I think it's time for me to start posting again, and probably posting quite a lot. To make it really simple, we've had over the past few months the craziest of situations unfolding. Everyone in the world's been affected by the pandemic, and only just now I think the majority of people are starting to become aware that on the back of this pandemic there's something even worse coming. The world economy is teetering on the edge of disaster, and we're seemingly moving towards another Cold War, possibly even worse than the one that the older generation would recognize from the days when the USSR and the West used to square up to each other. The reason why I want to post, though, is to help people understand that in environments that are so challenging as what we're going into, there are things that you can do. Also to be aware of the dangers. An example of this is when brother turns against brother, when we have Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, fights on the different university campuses about gay rights, trans rights, when women liberation, female liberation movements start squaring up against gay rights movements. What you're basically finding is everybody's fighting everybody, and there's loads of little groups forming everywhere, and society almost moving to a point where it starts ripping itself apart. And whenever that happens, one has to ask who's benefiting. Now, I don't want to answer that question. I think that's for everybody to answer for themselves. But to think a little bit further, that just a few years ago, although people had different viewpoints and although people had different political stances and religions and so forth, we didn't necessarily spend so much time wiping each other out or walk in the streets and rip statues down and burn people in their shops and cause harm and pain everywhere we went because we have some strong opinion that we want to enforce on others. But what I do want to make people aware of is who gets hurt, and that's everybody. You might think that your cause is so important, and because of that cause, no matter what you do is justified. But in the long run, whenever you do something to someone else, remember, you are doing that also to their family, their family's family, their children that's to come. And what you're basically doing is you're perpetuating a cycle of hate, a cycle of anger, violence. Just ask the people from Ireland who've had 300-400 years of perpetual violence and fighting each other. Ask the people in the Middle East, ask the people around Palestine and Israel. And your cause might be justified in your mind, but just think about what you're actually doing. You're teaching your children to hate, and your children's children to hate. And from that comes a world that hates, that causes just more pain and destruction everywhere. Whereas there are different ways to approach this, different ways, adult or grown-up ways to approach this. And I find whenever people try to simplify things, almost like a child simplifies things into the goodies and the baddies, and draw a line, those people over there, they're the baddies, and the people over here, they're the goodies. Whenever that starts happening, people do horrendous things. For example, Nazis in the Second World War. If you look at the propaganda and the sort of talk that they had amongst each other, they felt they were doing a great thing to wipe out millions of people. I can assure you the people on the receiving side did not feel that. In that same way, if you go back in history everywhere, Stalin with his mass murders in the USSR and wider, If you look at Mao Zedong and what he did, Pol Pot, go back to Genghis Khan, you can find so many examples of hate and anger and violence and murder in the name of some good purpose, some higher ideal. Be very careful of the prophet that brings you the higher ideal, but first we must do this horrible thing to achieve that higher ideal. You find very quickly that the horribleness never stops and the higher ideal never gets achieved. So from here on, I'm going to start posting short videos that discuss certain resources that people can use to actually make themselves strong, to actually change themselves rather than trying to change the world, and by changing themselves thereby change the world, but change it in a way that makes everyone strong and makes everyone healthy and makes everyone grow, and in actual fact brings solutions to the problems that our world has, very real problems, but solutions that actually work and that do not come at the price of mass murder and mayhem and burning and destruction and pain and rape and pillage, the horrors that we see everywhere unfolding in the world. And I'm very sad to say that I believe that over the next few years the chances are things are going to get worse, much worse than what they are now. And for people with a conscience and people with a higher sense of being, I think it's going to be very important to have something to fall back onto, something that they can help themselves to grow and to be strong, never mind what happens around them, so that they can survive it and so that they can have an impact on it. Because when the ashes are all that remains and when the ruins are all that stand, someone is going to have to rebuild everything again. And my hope is that it would be people with a strong sense of moral justice, a strong sense of community, but also the ability to think and reason rather than just simplify things into you bad, me good, and I'm going to bash your head in until you see it my way, because that's no way to live. Anyway, so that is Dr. Francois, and I wish you well. My next post, I will start with these different resources. I think one of the most useful ones that I can give you now, though, is for my listeners, my followers, to look at Marcus Aurelius. This was an emperor of the old Roman Empire that had certain writings and certain philosophies that might be very useful. So if you want to get to know more about him, there's loads of information on Google, loads of information on YouTube. Just put in Marcus Aurelius and follow what you find. Thank you very much. All the best and all the love. Take care.